Hi everyone. I'm going to wait a few moments to let some people join. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this conversation. I am so thrilled to be speaking with Isaias Hernandez today, who is a environmental educator and climate creator, and he focuses on a bunch of different topics, but he mainly focuses on environmental justice, veganism, and also low-waste, plastic-free living. This is actually our third deep dive for Plastic-Free July, so if you haven't already listened to the other ones, I highly recommend that you do so. We spoke with Madeline McGillivray on the pipeline to plastics concept, and we also had Sierra take over our Instagram to share some of her favorite plastic-free tips and tools for reducing plastic in her daily life. So definitely check those out after this one. But I'm such a huge fan of Isaias, his work, everything that he puts out into the world, and I seriously cannot wait to chat with him today. We're going to be unpacking why individual action and also systemic change are both important parts of the climate solution. I think when we talk about the climate conversation or when we enter the climate conversation, there's often this debate between individual action and systemic change, and it can be kind of hard to navigate where to focus your energy in creating a positive impact. So I'm excited to talk to Isaias about that and to see his perspective on it. So let me bring him up now. Yay!
It worked. It worked. I'm so glad. I'm so sorry about that. I was
Oh my
like,
gosh, no, I'm so excited to talk to you.
yeah, thank you again for having me. I was like so confused. I was like, oh wait, is like I don't know what happened in IG, but I was like, whatever.
Okay, so maybe just let's start by you introducing yourself, a bit about, maybe your work too, just for anyone who's following us who is unfamiliar with you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Isaias, also known as Queer Brown Vegan. I'm an environmental educator. I had a really passion for environmentalism since growing up in LA. Experiencing environmental injustices really made me passionate to become an environmental scientist in undergrad. After that, I worked multiple jobs. I worked with Leah at one point. And now I'm an environmental educator that just focuses on creating sustainability education for people and to have these like deeper conversations of how we frame things and how we talk about things in our modern nature world.
Perfect. I'm kind of curious, what made you or what inspired you to get involved in this education work and this advocacy work?
Yeah, definitely. So I will say that in college, when I had thought like to be an environmentalist, you should get a degree, you should go to college, right? And essentially, my mission always tells people like you don't need a degree to be an environmentalist, right? I went through academia. I realized how much issues academics have, especially like institutions of how they uphold elitism, classism, racism,
Mm-hmm.
homophobia. And so for me, I realized like my passion for environmental education started when I started learning about these different terminologies. And I was like, wow, these are so great, but they're so inaccessible sometimes because they don't really define the cultural experiences that many people of color go through. And so in doing so, I remember taking a lot of notes, and I used to color code my notes in college. That's how I really learned, and taking all that information. And when I graduated, I felt a little bit helpless that I wasn't doing anything with my degree, and all this knowledge wasn't being shared. And so I got into education because I didn't see myself as a traditional educator that went to teaching school, but I saw myself more of a digital educator that's like, I'm going to share these things and share my thoughts and share it with my community. And so eventually a lot of people just like got invested into this like color coding infographics. And since then my work has evolved into like reels and different things, but I think I would say that the fact of accessibility was my main passion to make it because I
Right.
don't think no one should ever have to go to thousands of dollars for an institution to pay to learn about environmental justice. Like that is ridiculous.
Yeah, amazing. And I love the point about accessibility, and now people can just go on your page and learn about so many different things. I mean, you post new things all the time, and I always learn so much from you. And so I'm so excited to kind of dig into your brain a bit about this topic specifically. I think let's dive right into it, into plastic and zero waste living and low waste living. But specifically, we really wanted to have this conversation with you to kind of unpack that individual action versus systemic change debate, which I feel like is pretty strong in the climate movement right now. I think on one hand, plastic pollution and the climate crisis is really viewed as a consumer issue. And to solve these issues, we just need consumers to be making more informed and better choices. But on the other hand, it's really arguable that there are a few large corporations that are really driving the climate crisis and plastic pollution. So I think having that, polar opposite sides to the problem can really be confusing for people as they kind of join the climate movement, trying to figure out where to focus their energy. So I'm curious, your perspective on this. I think through your content, you promote a lot about sustainable living and sustainable lifestyle choices. So, why do you think that individual action is important and does matter?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like to get started with individual action is that like so many people have different interests, right? It's like we all enter environmentalism through different sectors. Like I entered through the environmental justice sector. Some people enter through conservation. Some people enter through zero waste or veganism. And so I think for me, like the importance about individual action is that it leads to collectivized vulnerability. Because I think people for so long have shamed themselves to feel like I don't know what's going on, and now I'm learning and I feel stressed out, is that there's no accountability for both spaces to understand like it shouldn't come from the labor of someone to having to explain to you about these ideologies either, that is a person of color, but also it needs to be reckoning that what you're doing is actually making a change for others around you, because essentially what we want to push people is into local change, right? Like community change, because most often not, people stress themselves out comparing systemic and individual, thinking, okay, I need to be a lawyer, I need to go into a conservation organization to create all this large-scale change to save my planet. But in reality, I think a lot of people need to understand like their community is the most valuable asset to them, and is such a powerful tool to create change. So for me, I always say like individual action is good because this is where we start to question ourselves. We start to question the values that we uphold. We start to question like our relationships. We start to question how we've been thinking about life. And so unfortunately, not that many people have the same lived experience as everyone, because if that was true, of course, we'd be in a different state. We'd be in a different mind, game. But I think now that people are taking action to this individual action, whether it's reducing waste, like reducing meat intake, whatever they need, it almost creates this sense of security, this sense of validation to be like, I didn't think I could do this before, now I can.
Right.
So this is the moment where we need to get people inspired and then push them to that local change, which is their community. And that's something that I think a lot of people do shame a lot in lifestyle movements, right? It's often thought about like, oh, because you only talk about lifestyle, you don't talk about other things. And so I think there needs to be an even balance of like, we still don't know what they're doing offline, right? A lot of people may not post what they're doing offline, but some people do want to post a balance of lifestyle and education and systemic change and local change. So I think this social media has kind of indoctrinated people to think like you're not doing enough. And this is obviously in relation to societal norms of how we see society, right? It's like even I feel sometimes that I'm not doing enough and like I need to be doing more. And so there needs to be this acknowledgement saying, I am doing enough for now, and I will continue to increase my work to become better.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think, just me personally, when I live a more sustainable lifestyle, it feels good to align with my values. But I think what's been the best part is inspiring my peers and some of my friends. And, a bunch of my friends now compost, and they didn't even know what that was before. So it's motivating, just like you said. It's also inspiring too, to see real change happening around me rather than just, out in nowhere and just on social media. It's like, it's nice to have that validation from your community, that people are actually listening and making these changes. So totally agree there. I think individual action is really about inspiring that collective action, but then also just doing what you can. And it feels good to do that as well, which I think is important.
Yeah.
But I do think, it is safe to say that these large issues, climate crisis, plastic pollution, etc., are not going to solve themselves with just individual actions alone. I think, we really do need progressive policy change. We need industry change, better regulations to hold these polluters accountable. So, I think people also recognize that, but they're like, I don't know how to advocate for larger change, or how can I contact my policymakers, et cetera. So I was wondering if you had any tips or advice on how people can kind of advocate for that larger systemic change or get involved on a bigger level.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues, right, is to understand like what industries are at play. Because I think that many of the times people think, oh, like, polluting industries are different, they operate for different things. But in reality, the petrochemical industries, desalination industries, they are grabbing water at fast rates. They are depleting natural resources. Petrochemical industries are predominantly in Black and Latinx communities. And so when we kind of give this humanization picture that like there are people in the United States today that are dying from cancer, their children have a large scale of learning disabilities that prevents them to going to higher education. There's a lot of things that really go into the injustice. And so I think when people have this like idea of like, okay, these are kind of the large forces we're reckoning with, is understanding what it is in my community that is accessible, right? Like, for example, if I'm trying to get involved into my city and local government, is there a translation for Spanish in different languages? Most often not, you don't see that in certain areas. And for example, I was in a panel yesterday in Texas, and they even said the biggest issue is that people do know about these things. They're not accessible in terms of resources. So I would say language diversity is one of the most important things to recognize. Like if we want to make this more collectivized and engaging, we have to have translations for different types of people, because that's what we really want, right? We want universal justice. We want universalism to be really brought about. And I think too, the other thing, like where people don't know or they're stressed about what their place is in the movement, is asking yourself like, what are you really good at, right? Like a lot of people, you don't need to be an influencer, you don't need to be an artist, you can be like a painter, you can be a writer. It's like we need different types of people in these movements to get involved. And so I think that like when you start to collaborate with other organizations, they get to become stronger in the resistance. And also another thing I would say is like looking to your local environmental justice organization. These organizations have the least amount of funding, get the least amount of recognition. And this is because the idea of environmentalism not being viewed as pretty, or it's something that's very unappealing for people to kind of understand. And so for me, as someone that experienced injustice, I always tell people like, if you collectively believe in the planet, in fighting for healthy air, water, and soil, that means that you also have to fight for my right. You have to fight for other communities' rights. So I would say really extending yourself to these organizations, because right now they need funding, they need awareness. It takes $0 also on Instagram or on TikTok to raise awareness on these issues. It really does not take that much time to talk about it. So I would say that if you're having issues trying to connect with your local community and being like, what do I start? Like I'm a high schooler or a college student. Start off with who you know in your networks, because this is what really kind of creates this long-term sustainable activism to me. It's not just about, like I have to create this large-scale change, I'm alone. So many people forget that like there's different people that are existing right now that are either on the front lines, are behind the lines doing digital activism, people that are like doing language translation. Like we need to remember that like, yes, we can feel hopeless and hopeful at the same time, but we cannot forget the amount of power that we hold as a community to challenge these systems that are continuously polluting and killing Black, Indigenous people of color and at whole the planet. So I would say those are kind of the most easiest ways, especially if you just don't know that much about your community. Like get involved in social media, connect with your friend, you'll meet people, and then you start to collaborate with them.
Yes, yeah, I love that. I think it's easy to feel alone and just like one person, but if there's something that you're really passionate about or really good at, Ayana Johnson always says like your superpower. If you figure out, your superpower, there's definitely a group that's already focusing on that. And so you don't need to start fresh and from scratch. You don't need to be an influencer. You don't need to like create this big splash to make an impact. You just need to seek out that support. And for the most part, there will always be support there, if you're willing to look for it. And I think that's a really important part. And then also just like you said, in terms of the individual versus systemic, as individuals, we carry that power for the systemic change. And so it's like you don't need to focus on one or the other if you're kind of focusing on both and seeing the power that you have as an individual. And reaching out to your policymakers is quite easy now because of the internet, and your voice really does matter. And I think that that's also an important message to drive home, is that you may just be one person, but your voice has impact, and your community has even bigger impact too.
Yeah, and I would say too, like I add on to the fact of like a lot of people think we see a lot of doom and gloom on the news, right? A lot of us see like in different areas of countries that are flooding, and yes, it's valid to say yes, people are being harmed, but there is a decrease in local reporting in our own area, and I think this is what kind of contributes to the long-term eco-anxiety or stress to people, is that you're not seeing what's happening in your area. And
Right.
so what happens is then that you're just given this like news outlet from different countries, which is of course important to know, but understanding too, like in your environment, there are people really literally creating change and trying to pass laws for either affordable housing, for like the protection of conservation species. Like these are things that are constantly being talked about.
Totally. I feel like people like the sexier, flashier things, like higher level, but grassroots community organizations are really where so much of this change happens. So yeah, just like amplifying your community actions and getting involved there, I feel like is so important.
Yeah, definitely.
And also I think too, at Oceanic, we really do believe in that whole, top down, bottom up approach to sustainability and just for making impact. And, we really need change from the top down, but for that to happen, we need that advocacy from the bottom up, from, everyday individuals. So yeah, that's kind of how we see this. That's our position on this debate, I'd say. I don't think that there really is an individual versus systemic. It's kind of all together.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean, like, I think, like, for me, like, I think about, like, communities create change, not institutions. Not saying that institutions do not create change. I'm saying that the reason why institutions have created change is because it's came from the community, right? People who are elected Congress, people who are elected politicians came from those communities, understand the violence that has and injustices that permeated through our systems. And so when we kind of distill the fact of, like, we need to be up there in, like, in the presidency or, like, politicians to get there, it's like, no, in community, like, have created long-term change for those cities and creating regenerative systems for them.
Love that. I think so. It's Plastic Free July, and before we wrap things up, I would love to hear what some of your favorite tips and tricks are for reducing plastic, or maybe some of your favorite resources or tools that you can share with us.
Yeah, definitely. So this is actually such a good question. So as everyone knows, I like try out different zero waste products. So I would say first start off with what you have, right? Like I understand the consumption of sustainable products, right? It's sustainable, like being mindful of that, but recognizing like where do you want to reduce your stuff. So I really honestly divide my lifestyle by like bathroom, living room, bedroom, and kitchen. I will say I use plastic every day in my kitchen. Like I do not go to the farmer's market every week. It's impossible for me to honestly buy plastic-free groceries. Like I'd probably be depleted of my own financial resources, and it's just really honestly hard for me to even get there without a car. But I would say like for the bathroom, right? A lot of us do not consume any products in there. We don't eat. I mean, maybe we eat our toothpaste by accident, but really switching out like your products. So like, like those easy swaps, like, using a bamboo toothbrush or an electric toothbrush and the plastic ones, or opting in for like different types of shampoo bars, right? Like I know I've had really good success with shampoo and conditioner bars, and so I would say like if there's a certain product that you've been really wanting to really retry, I'd say go for it. Another thing in the kitchen I would recommend is like I used to use a lot of plastic wrap, right, to like wrap my food. I got these like vegan hemp wax. I forgot what they're called, but you've seen them before, Leah.
Yeah.
And like they honestly work super good, and like they I don't need plastic anymore to wrap my food in them, and so those are kind of the most easiest things. And then other things I guess I would recognize for people just trying to like start off with what they're trying to do is like look into the amount of waste that you generate, right? Like how much things can be recycled, how much things can be composted, because the reality is like most people living in the East Coast and maybe New York and like New Jersey, like we don't have compost bins. Like I had to build one myself. And so like I'm able to do that. And so I think you get to really pick things out there. Also, I know I had the wheat straw that you all gave me. So honestly, yeah, like using any types of different straws, like try them out. But yeah, vegan hemp wick, I must know. I got it from a brand. Actually, can I just go get it? It'll take me like 5 seconds.
Yeah, go get it. I think while he's gone, one of my biggest tips is when I'm kind of advising people on how to reduce their waste. That was so fast.
Yeah.
I was,
So this,
I've seen those
so
before.
this is the one. Yeah, there's a non-vegan one, but this is the vegan one.
Yes.
It's called Kala and Co. This small-owned business, I believe in maybe Colorado. I don't know. I don't remember too much, but they're really great and really easy to use.
They're beautiful too.
Yeah.
I like stasher bags as well for kind of the same reason of like covering open fruit or whatever, and it keeps it for so much longer. They're amazing.
Yeah, no.
But when you were, oh sorry, no, you go.
Oh no, you go ahead, don't worry.
I was just saying that when you left, I was explaining like when people are asking how do I reduce my waste, I often just suggest like looking at what you're throwing away the most of. Whether, maybe it's plastic water bottles or to-go coffee cups, or maybe you're getting takeout a bunch, and then focusing on ways to kind of make those more sustainable. Are there alternatives that might work just the same, but they're not single-use plastics? And so looking at what you're throwing away is a nice place to start. But then, like what you said, even not even buying anything new, just can I recycle more, or maybe can I start composting? So I think, yeah, that's a great place to start for anyone wanting to get involved.
Yeah, and I would say too, like, don't shame yourself if you like end up getting plastic, or like, like you sometimes you accidentally like put something in the wrong bin. Like that has happened to me, or I'm like, oh my god, and then like I pull it out, or sometimes I'm like, oh no, it's too late. Mistakes are organic, right? At the end of the day, like this is more of an empowering step to do, not of like a perfectionist mindset you need to have, right? Like you're like watching and monitoring, because it's the same thing with like just like it creates negative habits and tendencies, and then creates burnout, and then you're just like not attracted to that lifestyle. You see it as a negative light. And so I always tell people just to be realistic with yourselves. Like I tell all my followers, like I use plastic every day, like I wear it in my mouth for my retainers, and I don't have any shame. Like I try my best, and that's all I'm going to keep doing.
Yeah, and I think it's Zero Waste Chef who says this, but we need I don't know exactly how she says it, but we need a bunch of people doing zero waste imperfectly, not a few people doing it perfectly. And I think that just explains it incredibly well, is that, you don't need to be plastic free or completely zero waste. Honestly, it's impossible to do that. The system is not made for that, especially access, I think, is spoken about a lot. But if you don't have a grocery store that you can buy things, unwrapped, then what can you do? So I don't think it's shaming yourself for the things that you're unable to do, but just looking at things that you are able to change that are accessible to you. So yeah, definitely don't shame yourself, because it's going to be impossible to be perfect.
Yes, exactly. That's the way to have a more sustainable lifestyle.
Totally. Yeah. Something that is actually long lasting and not just quick burnout, like you said. Amazing. Okay. I feel like that's a really nice place to kind of wrap up. But for anyone who wants to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I will say, like, if anyone has any random questions, feel free to ask. But you can find me at Queer Brown Vegan or queerbrownvegan.com. Right now, actually, I'm writing a book on zero waste veganism and environmental justice. So that has been a nightmare, but like I'm good, trying to get through it. That will not be anytime soon this year or next, probably next. But please stay tuned for any updates on that. Other resources I guess I would check is really understanding the origins of plastic-free and zero waste. A lot of people, I think, tend to think it came about in early 2000s, like late 2010s. But in reality, it's really an indigenous practice. And the terminology actually that was defined by the Zero Waste International Alliance it actually talks about environmental justice. So it's really interesting to see now how in modern lifestyle movements, the environmental justice component of corporations polluting low-income communities of color is left out or deleted. So
Mm,
it makes you think like why did it change into this apolitical stance of like you're just trying to reduce your waste when in reality trying to save the planet is political
right.
already.
Totally. Oh my gosh. All right. So I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing your knowledge. I cannot wait to read your book. You'll have to keep me updated on that. If
And
anyone does have questions as well, we'll be posting this to IGTV and you can leave them there and then we can work together to get back to people. But thank you so much. And thank you to everyone watching and happy Plastic Free July.
yeah, happy Plastic Free July. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.